Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Our friend Neo and our other friend Debbie, neither one are going to be able to join us today. Neo's got, Neo has all the things he always has going on. That guy is like the busiest man on the face of the planet. And Debbie G, of course, working on a bunch of Unify projects. So she's in the middle of the usual crazy stuff that happens during the spring. But I have a special guest joining me today. Her name is Alara Sage, and in her own words, she's here to reignite and activate the power of the playful and pleasurable woman. And this is going to be an interesting conversation to have because I happen to be of the other gender. So this is kind of like me looking in to see, okay, so what are these guys actually talking about? This is going to be kind of fun. So Alara, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Walt. I'm excited for this conversation.
This is going to be fun. This is going to be interesting. So, all right, you got to give people some background. Tell us how all this pleasurable woman stuff got started.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I kind of had this life where I was not really fulfilled. And even the things that I did that supposedly were the things that I enjoyed, I didn't really enjoy. I didn't really have a lot of pleasure, a lot of enjoyment in my life. And I started my spiritual awakening. And one day I was in my car driving and I heard my higher self tell me to Om 3 times. At the time, I wasn't a big Omer. I knew what it was, but it wasn't like my practice. But I listened, and so I took a nice deep breath, Om, all the way to the end. And I did that 3 times. And on the 3rd time, a shot of energy shot through my body, out my crown, and I went into a full body orgasm.
Oh, my God.
Which I had never experienced.
Which is also a little bit unusual when you're driving, but okay, yeah.
It was super unusual. I had to pull the car over, to enjoy the process. And it lasted a couple of minutes. I had no idea what had happened to me. And after that, I was on cloud 9. I was so lit. I was so blissed out for the rest of the day. And again, I had no idea what had happened to me. And so the next 6 months, I went through this roller coaster, pretty chaotic, where one day I'd be like mad. The next moment I would be sad. And then I would be, depressed and then elated and happy. I was all over the emotional board and still didn't know what was happening to me and kept kind of checking in. Am I going insane? Is this what's happening?
Quite understandable. I mean, when you get all that going on, yeah.
And the message just kept coming through. No, just let the emotion through you. And so I did. And around 5 to 6 months, it started to reach an equilibrium. And as it happens for me, a book fell into my lap called Kundalini Awakening. And there was a chapter in there around spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And so that's what I had. And the Kundalini, the creative life force energy, the healing energy that we all carry, had shot through my body and had released all of these stored emotions, the stored trauma, all of this, this delightful stuff that I was hiding away somewhere in my cells. And, and then, that just really powered me forward as a catalyst into, for one, just really understanding that hey, my life was what it was. And I experienced this bliss, this ecstasy, this cloud 9 that I had never connected to. I didn't know what it felt like. I had no idea that was even, necessarily possible. So it really opened my eyes to what we are capable of and started me on this journey of really understanding how to, be that, really embody that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. Well, I can kind of imagine right now there are a number of listeners that are doing some ums just to see what happens. But in your particular case, there was an interesting contrast going on there because you describe how before that it was your life seemed, I'll use my own terminology. It felt like it was kind of blah. Like it didn't feel like it was going anywhere. And then all of a sudden you have this defining moment. You have this Kundalini awakening experience. And then boom, you're off into, you're releasing all these emotions that have been built up over the years and you're on cloud 9. I mean, that's a transition. That's like, whoa, that's a big transition. So the question I have to ask first and foremost is, What do you attribute that to? What do you think actually caused that to happen?
To me, it was divine orchestration. You know, I was starting my spiritual journey. I've had a lot of these very catalyst type events in my life for whatever reason. That's, I guess, the timeline I chose was to make it very intense and quick and rapid. And so, you know, as I said, I had started my spiritual journey. So I had started meditating. I was working with my chakras, and it was just the timing. It was right. It was ripe, I guess, and ready to go.
All right. So you started from this really, wow, amazing point, this orgasmic point. And then what happens after you have this breakthrough, all this cool stuff going on, and then you decide you're going to do something with it. What do you decide to do?
Change my life. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really what I realized was what you said, that my life was really blah, you know, and I got a divorce, you know, I made a massive life change, and I really started this journey of like, what is fulfillment? What is joy? What is pleasure? What is happiness? And, you know, really what I was taken into was, of course, ourself, you know, myself. And the belief structures I held, the shame, the guilt, the self-hatred that I had held in myself that had me really, really shut down. I mean, I was a very shut down person, and I just went through this healing journey of releasing that. And, you know, my life now is really, really orgasmic. Like I use the word orgasm because it feels like orgasm. I have full body orgasms now all the time, not in sex, just in life. Like I talk and I share, and then I get these hits and waves of orgasm. And, you know, I feel like this is what I'm here to do, is to help people understand that like orgasm isn't just for sex. Like we can experience this in our life.
It's a proposition that I think perhaps it's going to throw some people, because we have a certain association going on there, and you're saying, well, you don't have to be tied to that association. So walk us through that a little bit. I mean, first of all, what's it like to go through? I mean, here's the image in my mind. You're walking along and boom, all of a sudden you go off like a light bulb, and then you're walking on some more. You know, so it sounds actually a little disruptive in some ways, but I get the sense it's not really the way you're experiencing it. So from your perspective, what are you experiencing as you're going through this? What does it feel like to be living this, I don't know, this new lifestyle, I guess is what I'd call it?
You know, I would kind of agree with you that it can be disruptive in the sense that I can be, you know, talking and then have these hits, and I have to pause and like go into this moment of like erotic pleasure. And then, you know, it only lasts a couple of seconds, for the most part. And then I come back. But, you know, the point of it is that there's this beautiful way that I have taught myself to connect to my reality and connect to my life and really create this very beautiful, lit, alive, radiating life. And my life is very, very different than most people's lives. I have a schedule. Well,
I think we already got that sense anyway. I mean, just from what you've described so far, that alone would make it very different. But I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Oh, that's a good point. Good point. But I live my life outside of like things like this that I schedule. I live my life in this very connected, intuitively driven manner. And so my life is very, very playful. It's very, very joyous. And as I mentioned, orgasmic. And it's very easy. Like I really want the listeners, I want to invite them right now to understand that, you know, we have these belief structures in humanity that life has to be challenging. Life, and I love challenge. Like I'm up for challenge, but difficult, right? Life has to be a struggle. That it has to be painful, you know, that we have to grind, just do the grind and then retire and have your fun, or do your job and then go on vacation and have your fun. Right. But what I have experienced in my life and what I'm here to show people is that that's not the truth. And so I invite the listeners to just kind of acknowledge, like take a deep breath into their bodies and like, where are you believing in the grind? Where are you believing in the rat race? Where are you believing in the struggle? And that's always the first step, is just that awareness that we have that belief structure. Because I most definitely did.
Yeah. Oh, I think Well, I would have said up until this conversation, everybody on Earth has that belief structure in one form or another. I kind of suspect that in your case, it's evolved. It has shifted around a bit. But I mean, when you come into the physical world, you're dealing with a world of limitations. I mean, that's just part of what it is to be physical. So there's going to be some limiting belief structures of one kind or another. The question is, are they serving you or are they fighting you? And you're talking about how do you get past the ones that you're fighting and get to the ones that are serving you?
Absolutely. Yes.
So talk about that a little bit. And I know let's orient it particularly in the way that you do with your career pattern, because you're primarily working with women, helping women to be more. I'll let you put your own words. I'm not going to put my words into it, but be more of themselves. Let's put it that way. But as you're working with them, talk about some of the things that you're working on with them, that you're helping them to focus or refocus on.
Yeah. So when I work with clients, one of the I work with very usually high achieving women who have really stepped into their masculine energy for the most part, which has been very wonderful. Like I'm not against that at all. They've been successful. They've created beautiful things. And they also have created this disconnect of themselves, like that I experienced. And so when I work with women, I'm really helping them to understand that while that ambitious performance mindset. And what I mean by that is that our value, our worth is defined by what we achieve, right? Our value, our worth is defined by our success, what we obtain, what we create, right? Rather than our value and our worth is always there. And we get to create and we get to obtain and succeed. So that shift into themselves and that allowance of letting go of a lot of this belief structure that we have to, again, grind, overwork ourselves, exhaust ourselves, chase fulfillment. And instead, I teach them to really connect to their bodies, to connect to their womb, to connect to their sexual organs, and to connect to their pleasure. Again, non-sexually, like what brings you pleasure right now? What brings you pleasure in life? Connecting to those things, bringing those more into your life so that your life becomes nourishing. Your life becomes fulfilling rather than this thing that you have to go take a break from your life to get that nourishment, to get that fulfillment.
When you're using the word pleasurable, I'm kind of running through different synonyms in my mind, asking myself, okay, how is she using this word right now? And I guess the one that I'm coming closest to, I'm curious to know if I'm on the right track where you're coming from, is joy. That it sounds like you're you're moving and helping your client move more toward a joy-filled experience.
Yes. And there's a reason that I use pleasure and there's a reason that I use orgasm, because this is an actual felt sense in the body of like pleasure as we would experience it sexually, and orgasm like we would experience it sexually, but in life. So yes, there is a sense of joy. There's a sense of love and fulfillment, but there's actual like pleasure in the body. And that's something that I think we're really disconnected from in humanity. I mean, just a conversation that I have the same conversation with you that I have with others where they think pleasure, orgasm, that's sex. How does that relate to our everyday life?
Well, that also raises more questions then. So if we're talking about something that is a physical pleasure, not necessarily associated with sex, but just a physical pleasure, I imagine that it kind of takes on different forms, different colors, different textures, depending on what it is that you're focusing on or thinking about or engaging in. And I would also imagine that the physical aspect of that pleasure really informs not just the experience of it, but how you interact with it. That
absolutely,
how you interact with your daily life has to change substantially if you're having a physical reaction every single moment of the day.
Yes. Well, what I teach the women that I work with to do is to really tune into their bodies and start asking their bodies what is lighting them up.
Okay.
And so they're starting to guide their life with that feeling, that sensation of wow, that really lights me up. Which one? What do I want to do right now? Do I want to do this? Oh, that. Oh my God. I really feel that pleasure in my body when I think about doing that. Sweet. And then they give themselves permission to do that. And again, these are very, very successful, high achieving women, but it radically shifts their experience into enjoyment, that now they are creating their life through the vibration of enjoyment, through the vibration of pleasure and joy in those moments. And yes, there are things that we have to do that we don't enjoy, right? Like taxes. Maybe there's some people who do like taxes.
They're called accountants, actually. But yes, I understand what you mean.
That's true. So those people.
Those people.
Outside of those people. So like, for instance, what I do is I tend to go and do something that really lights me up. And then I sit down to do my taxes. So I'm bringing that delicious vibration into something that I don't like doing, or I'll take breaks from it and do things that are lighting me up in between. And so it's really shifting like the foundation of what we're creating our life within, the vibration of it.
Is it, in your view, is it the same kind of thing as anything else in life where we're learning how to, in terminologies that we use in these circles, the law of attraction circles and so forth, we're trying to learn how to raise our vibration, and we're finding ourselves running into what we usually call resistance points or obstacles and trying to figure out how to get around them. I kind of get the sense that you're talking about the same kind of thing with this pleasurable side, but I'm still looking for verbiage, I guess, that kind of ties it all together.
Yes. Thank you. So, the energy of orgasm is ecstatic bliss. And this is a sixth density energy. In sixth density consciousness, we experience ecstatic bliss. That is our natural state of being. It is an extremely high vibration. So yes, this is about teaching ourselves to engage in our life so that we are activating that bliss, that ecstasy. We are activating those higher frequencies, and thus we are creating and or attracting, same thing really, in the context of our physical reality.
So then now let's dive into how do we go about removing these resistance points? How do we go about activating the physical pleasurable side of things when we have either a lifetime or even just a short period of time of not doing that, of kind of being disconnected from it? Just, it's like you were describing before, life is boring.
Yes. Yeah. So, when I work with women, we are always working on, it just naturally goes back to early childhood, between 3 to 6 years of age. And in this time period, we're becoming very emotional, and we're starting to really express and like really wake up, right, as humans out of like babyhood into toddler. And, the generations of my parents and most of the generations that we have so far, strong emotion, strong expression hasn't really been understood, accepted, and most definitely not appreciated, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So in those early years, there's a lot of suppression and like, stop that, don't do that, knock it off, be quiet. Because just as humans, we just weren't comfortable with emotion, basically, is what it was. And so when I work with women, we're really releasing a lot of that initial programming and the shame and the guilt that is the core that says that who we are and our most unbridled, innocent expression, which is highly creative, highly orgasmic. Our innocence has sexual, creative Kundalini energy associated. It's 100% that expression. That version of them is safe. That version of them is their genius. It is the part of themselves that they have been seeking. And they always feel like they haven't quite grasped. So my clients, as we work through this shame and this guilt of themselves, first off, they deeply connect to themselves. Their intuition skyrockets. They can communicate with their bodies. They can communicate with all the levels of themselves, and their creative expression explodes. I have a lot of women who've written books who had no intention of writing books. And they feel like they really know their authentic self.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and that whole idea of writing a book when you had no intention of writing a book is funny on a number of different levels, not the least of which because for myself, I had certainly in my earlier years, I had no intention of writing a book, and I ended up writing not only a novel, but also editing a nonfiction book. And it was like the last thing I thought I would ever do. So I can identify with that part of it, but and anybody who's ever done a book knows just how much work goes into it. So when you start getting into the work, you realize, well, yeah, there was a good reason why I didn't want to do these books, but you end up doing them anyway. And the reason I bring this up is you're talking repeatedly about, you're describing it as the orgasmic experience, the pleasurable experience of doing it. And that's the funny thing that happens when you really get into writing the book. There is there's a period of writing the book where this is the period where you're trying to get your thoughts together and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I want to structure this? And what's my message going to be? And what do I want to emphasize? And what do I want to leave out? And all that kind of thing. And then you get to a point where all of a sudden you've got the whole thing in your mind or on paper in an outline form, and you know where you're going. And then you get the inspiration of, wow, let's do it this way. And then you can't get the words out fast enough.
Yes.
And that to me is very much in alignment with what you're talking about, that orgasmic experience, that pleasurable experience.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And what that is that's creative life force energy flowing unbridled through you. So I always say creative life force, divine love, when it flows through us, that sensation is orgasmic.
Orgasmic is a good way of describing it. I mean, I know when I was doing that, I especially experienced that with the novel. When I was writing the novel, and I got it when all of a sudden I could see, you know how it is when you're telling any kind of a story, particularly a fictional story, you're trying to, you're building some sort of a conflict going on, and then you're trying to build up to some sort of a climactic type thing, just like, you know, with a sexual experience. But you're also, you're trying to, you know, kind of fool the reader about where you're actually going with it. And then you have a twist at the end, and you have all these things you're trying to put together. And if you've never done it before, it's pretty damn intimidating. You know, trying to actually write that thing out. But then when you finally have it, you say, oh, there it is. I've got it. That's almost indescribable. That's what I'm thinking about when you're talking about this pleasurable, orgasmic, non-sexually orgasmic experience. Because there's just, it's like there's this flow that needs to come out as soon as humanly possible.
Yes, exactly. You nailed it. See, you've had one. Well, you were one to have this conversation with.
Well, now that I know what we're talking about here, I actually think all of us have them at one time or another. And in a sense, what we're really trying to do in our lives is, this almost kind of makes it sound cheap, but it's really not intended to be cheap. It's like we're trying to get back to that over and over and over again. But in fact, what we're really doing is, yeah, that's kind of a way of describing what we're doing it, but we're trying to do it more in context with, here's the way I'm living my life, and I want to really live this. So as I think about that particular experience writing the book, I'm also thinking, well, there are other areas of my life where I was looking to have peak experiences while I was doing whatever it is that I was doing. And very often I would fail to get there. Very often I wouldn't even be in the same ballpark, the same neighborhood of it, right? And so I think we kind of get to the point where we feel like, well, that's just something that happens occasionally. It's not something that's I can count on to be a regular part of my life. And so here you are coming along saying, well, yeah, actually you can. That's kind of, well, it's exciting, but it's also a bit scary at the same time. Like, really? How do you do this?
Yes, because again, that's that innocence when, you know, let's take children, because children are such a wonderful example. And I think everybody has had experiences with young children, whether their own or somebody else's. Children are highly, highly creative. You know, they can just lose themselves in a story with two little figurines, right? And they can create this whole thing in their mind. That is their open centers, their sacral, their heart, and their pineal gland. Those creator centers are open, and they are in the innocence of play. They don't have any perceptions of it has to look a particular way, or it's not okay if I do this, or it's not okay. They're just in the moment, surrendered to it. And that's where that natural creative, that's the Kundalini Shakti, that natural creative life force energy just moves through them. And yes, this is something that we can experience regularly. No, I wouldn't say all the time, because there is an ebb and flow to our creative spirit, but regularly in a natural cycle of self.
Yeah, I'm recalling a conversation that I had recently with a good friend who he was a co-host here on the show for about 6 months. His name is David Strickle, and listeners know who he is. He's a channeler, kind of like a Nestor Hicks kind of person. He channels a group of entities called the Stream of David. And one of the things that he talks about is how he had been doing so much work on himself, and with so much support from his non-physical entities, who are, basically teaching him how to take the power that he has, that everybody has, and learn how to apply it and so forth, and then share it with others and teach it to others. In the course of doing all that, he was actually getting to that very high vibe state almost continuously. And you alluded to that a moment ago. And the thing that he pointed out, this is a conversation we had in September of last year. He said, you live in that state long enough and it gets boring. We come into this world to experience this contrast, and all of a sudden you're not living the contrast. You're just high vibe all the time. And he said, he literally, it's funny and sad all at the same time. He literally said, that he was going out of his way to come down a bit in vibration so he could experience more contrast in his life. And 4 months later, his house burned down.
Careful what you wish for. For me,
right. Yeah.
For me, I don't find it boring, because I always think that there's challenge in life, especially as an entrepreneur. There's as a business owner, that's a constant space of ability to find challenges and challenge ourselves and continue to create. So I find it very invigorating, but definitely honor him in that process. For sure.
He was certainly, even after he had that experience, he came back and he told us about what had happened with the fire and so forth. And even that for him, on the surface, there was a lot of trauma that went through it, but he's looking at it right now as if it was all just a wonderful next step on the great adventure of life, which I think is one of the things that happens when you are able to live high vibrational a lot of the time. Even when stuff happens that you don't really like, you kind of shrug it off like, oh, okay, well, that was an interesting little trip there, rather than, oh my God, my life just ended. I think that's really the difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. What I say is it becomes a dance. You become like, the owner of the dance floor rather than like working the stair stepper.
Yeah. That's another one. That's an analogy that resonates with me, because I'm a dancer, and the idea of doing stair steps is like, oh, please, no, God, I can't tolerate that idea. It's so dull. Give me something else to do, please. So I resonate with that one entirely. So, okay. So you're working with women who are highly successful. Like you said earlier, they've really drawn on their masculine side. You're helping them kind of reconnect with their feminine side. Tell us a little bit more about, give us, I don't know if you can draw on stories without, I know you can't really, you can't reveal people's individual situations or anything like that, but, are there any stories that you can tell us that kind of generically describe ways that women are able to break through, ways that women find a shift happening and get excited and kind of jump on board, all that kind of thing. I'm looking for ways to inspire listeners to say, yeah, I want to go for something like this.
Yeah. So one of my favorite examples is I have a client who she's in corporate, and she always, she's very successful, but always had that feeling of not being seen, even though, again, she's highly successful. And so as we did this work with her, what happened was she saw herself, right? She started to recognize her own innate beauty. And it was we released all that shame and guilt. And it was so beautiful. These transformations are just always so jaw dropping, because then all of a sudden at work, she was seen, and she wasn't doing anything different at work. Literally, she wasn't showing up differently if you were a little fly on the wall, it would have looked the same, but vibrationally, she was showing up differently. And the reaction to people, her relationships to people in her work really shifted. She felt very, very seen at work, and she really felt like people were reaching out for her and really desiring connection to her, which she hadn't experienced before. This kind of work really instills deep connection to ourselves. And, you know, everybody is just simply a reflection. And so we start to have these really wonderful connections to other people and other ones that we say, you know, no to very clearly.
Well, the boundaries are important. Boundaries are the way we define what it is that we don't want.
Yes.
And it's a skill that I think everybody needs to develop to one degree or another. I mean, everybody has developed it to one degree or another, and how much more they need to develop is going to be very individual or very individualized. But ultimately, in order to get what we want, we all have to define what we don't want. In order to define what we don't want, we actually have to know what we do want. They go hand in hand, and that's where the boundary comes in. The boundary says, this is what I don't want, and the removal of boundary says, this is what I do want. And it sounds so simple when you describe it that way, but when you're actually diving into the life of it, all of a sudden everything starts to look complex and gray and challenging.
I completely agree with you. And, you know, the conversation I love about boundaries is it's actually very simple, you know, as you said. And there's really no maybe. It's either a yes or it's a no. Where we get confused is where we believe, you know, there's a belief structure or there's something that we were taught that says that our no or a yes is not right, that we should have the other one. You know, maybe it's a no and we're feeling like, oh, but it should be a yes. I should want this, or, you know, or vice versa. And then it gets very, you know, murky. But that's why when I teach my women, I teach them to really feel it in their body. Does it light you up? You know, like a yes will light you up. You will feel it when you connect to your body and you learn these techniques. You will feel that yes very strongly, and you will also feel the no. And so they learn like very, very solid, clear. That's a solid no, and that's a solid yes. And then, of course, they still have to, you know, work through actually taking action on one or either of those. And that can still be a level of challenge, but at least they know with certainty what their boundary truly is.
Well, it also sounds like you're talking about kind of taking inventory throughout the day. I mean, it's not just wake up, go to work, and then, you know, see how you did at the end of the day.
It's constant. I mean, that's a connected life, right? A connected life is, you know, we want relationship, we want connection, we want intimacy. And that starts with ourself and our body and our bodies and the communication with ourselves. Like your body's telling you, hey, I need some water. Hey, I need rest. Hey, I need this food. Hey, I don't want, and we're just like, you know, we're horses with blinders on. We're not even like listening to any of it. So as I teach my girls, my women to, you know, listen, there's a constant conversation going on, which is delightful because you're constantly guided in life. We're not doing this, you know, blindly. It's just that we have stopped hearing the guidance that is so clearly there.
Well, we've also stopped trusting it too. I think that the lack of trust is what causes us to not listen anymore.
Oh, well, you know, I have such a great conversation. That is like 100% it. Yes.
So let's talk about trust for a little bit, because really trust and belief, they really are two peas in the same pod in a sense. Trust and belief are probably the number one thing in my experience anyway, that people run into as a challenge when they're zeroing in on something that has kept them from, in this case, finding that pleasurable experience in life. It could be, it doesn't really matter what it is we're talking about. We're talking about anything that we're trying to achieve or have success with or bring into our lives or whatever it is. But once we've identified not only what the thing is, but also where the blockage is, even if we don't know what the block is, we're still trying to figure out, okay, how do I get my belief going? How do I get my trust going? It's one of the first things that people, when they hear about law of attraction, they ask, okay, I got to believe in it, but I've never had that before. How do I believe it?
Yes. And, you know, that's definitely a personal, I'm sure you've gone through it as well. I've gone through the personal experience of having to strengthen my self-trust. Yeah. And again, for me, it starts with that 3 to 6 years of age when we're expressing just innocently and openly, and then we're told that person is just somehow not okay. That is a 100% where we start to block ourselves. And we start to say that like who I am obviously is not okay. So I can't trust myself.
Yeah, that is the message that keeps coming through. And we wonder where it comes from.
Yeah, from our society, from our parents, from schools, you know, and I feel like that's shifting, but that was the previous generations.
It is shifting. It's shifting slowly. It's not shifting across the board evenly, but it's also been kind of fun. One of the great things about doing a podcast like this is you get lots of different people coming onto the show, and you get lots of different perspectives and stories and so forth. And one storyline that has shown up a number of times is people coming on talking about how they've been learning how to empower their own children while they're children to basically take control of their own lives in ways that they themselves really didn't do or weren't allowed to do, or, you know, fill in the blank with whatever you want to fill it in with. But for whatever reason, as a child, they didn't actually feel like they had that same power. And the stories that come out of that are of children who have very different, very much more empowered and visceral, experiences in their lives, for lack of a better term. I mean, I want to find, I'm kind of in the same place as I was when I was trying to describe what it's like to have that novel that's ready to come pouring out. And how do you describe that feeling? I'm in the same place here trying to describe that with these kids. But we've even had a few of these kids on the show. Their parents bring their kids onto the show. And I mean, their view of life is so different from what we experienced, from what you experienced growing up, what I experienced growing up. I mean, they're growing up a completely different way. Again, this is not the way it's happening across the board throughout society, but it's exciting to see it when it happens.
Yeah, super exciting. I have 2 boys, and same thing. I've been raising them, and I just love it when they're like, you know, their intuition tells them something and they do it. And it's like, oh, like I caught myself. I heard like, don't go down the steps with your socks on, you know? And I was like, that's your intuition telling you, you know, and because they were going to slip and fall, you know, and it's like one of those things that they're just tapped in and they're listening, and they've learned that, hey, that voice is very, very important.
And not only that, they don't have the history, the baggage, I guess you might call it, built up like an adult has. So even if they've been on a track that doesn't get that kind of support, it doesn't take a lot to explain it to them and have them just kind of flip things around, because they aren't carrying all that baggage. I'm thinking right now of a co-host who I made an announcement yesterday that he's actually going to be revisiting and coming back on Tuesdays to join me, which I'm really excited about. His name is Joel Elson. He's been through all kinds of hell and back kind of situations. But he's also, one of the main things he's done in his career is he ended up, not by plan, just almost serendipitously, working with a lot of boys caught up in the foster care system, particularly the ones who were considered unadoptable. And it's really an important thing, because if a boy or a girl goes through the foster care system anywhere here in the U.S., I suppose it's probably true in other countries as well. I don't really know, but here in the U.S. anyway, and they don't get adopted, it's like a 99 to 100% chance that by the time they're 25, they'll either be dead or in prison. So it's really, really an important thing that these kids have some way of learning what their own power is. So he tells stories about how he empowers these kids. They turn their lives around. It's not like somebody else taught them. They literally turn their own lives around, like right in front of your eyes, simply because even with all the traumas that somebody going through the foster care system experiences, there just haven't been years and years and years of it yet. So they're able to flip that switch.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring.
It's the difference between that kind of that solidification that happens when something is repeated over time, repeated, it gets very solidified, versus if it's still in this kind of like gel-like state, right? It's more valuable.
Solidify is a great word. Yeah. That describes it really well.
Their consciousness, their belief structures are still in that malleable space. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. He tells the story of this one kid who, I remember what his real name is, but we don't use his real name. I'm trying to remember what the stage name is we use for him, and I can't remember what the stage name is, so I'm not going to name him at all. But we told this story before, and this kid, he was, I guess, about 9 years old when Joel encountered him. And he was like the worst behavior case in the entire system in the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. He was just really, by everybody's measure, he was completely out of control. He was a menace in any home that he was put in. He was a menace in school, failing grades all over the place. He was on something like a dozen and a half medications. I mean, he was just a mess. And the way Joel tends to get these kids is like everybody else does what they can and they give up. They say, okay, well, let's give it to Joel. He can usually do something. And so Joel sits down with this kid. He says, when he first met the kid was so soft and so shy in his manner that when he always makes it a point to shake hands with the kids. When he shook hands with the kids, it was like there wasn't even a hand there. It was so, there was so little self coming through. He had one conversation with a kid, one only. He explained how law of attraction works. That's usually his approach. He hands out copies of The Secret. So that's his way of starting conversations. He gives out like 1,000 of them a year. He just buys them in bulk. But anyway, he gives the kid a copy of the book and he's talking with the kid and he's explaining how the whole thing works. And the kid got it. You could tell. He could tell that the kid it just kind of clicked. And from the moment that it clicked, that kid turned from a menace into, I am now taking control of my life. And the way the story goes, I'm going to probably miss some of the key points, but he asked Joel, would you help me fire my psychiatrist? I mean, stuff like that. And he goes to meet with his foster mom and he apologizes to his foster mom for the way he's been behaving all the time that he's been in the foster home. And then he goes to his teacher and apologizes for all the trouble he's been causing in the class and asks for special help so he can catch up. And he turns into this model student who, last I heard, I think he's graduated from high school and he's now going to, university to pursue a career in psychology so he can help other kids. I mean, just a complete and total turnaround out of one conversation.
Yeah. And, I feel like at 9, they're so close to that. I was saying like 3 to 6 years of age. They're so close to that era of that initial, like, who am I?
Right.
And so for him, it was so quick to just slip right back into that and allow that authentic, true self to shine. I mean, that is just so gorgeous.
But that's just it. It really does illustrate how a child can make that shift. So yeah. I tell that story for a number of reasons, partly because it's an inspiring story and it's fun, but also because I want people who still have children at home to realize no matter what's going on with their kids can have that same kind of moment. Their kids can have that same kind of shift. It doesn't matter what they've gone through. It doesn't matter how this kid's traumas were horrific. Let me tell you, I haven't even told you what the traumas were, but I mean, they were absolutely horrific. And he still made that shift. I mean, if he can do that, what child can't?
Well, and honestly, what person can't? Because yes, I feel like for children, there is a level of like easier, but there's a lot of people who have overcome so much abuse and it can be a little bit more challenging, but it is possible. We can do it. And when we hear these stories of people overcoming and getting to these spaces, I mean, that's why we all do what we do, right? That's what you do, what you do, and why, is to help people to understand that they don't have to continue to choose the life that they're living, that they can create and live differently.
So let's take your point and expand upon that one a bit more, that it is not just kids, it's everybody, and it doesn't really matter what your circumstances have been. Now, if you had circumstances that have been going on for years and years and years, and you've got a lot to overcome, it may not happen overnight like it does for the kids, but you can still get there. And the reason I bring this up is I can think of listeners that I know of who are going through really, really rough times right now. And every once in a while I'll get emails, asking for help and so forth, and I help them the best I can. I'm not a coach, so I don't really, feel like I can do a whole lot in that regard, but I do what I can do. I love it whenever I can feed these people information that is going to help somebody in a way that I don't know about. So I'm going to kind of put it on you for a moment and say, you're talking to somebody who's just dealing with the worst of life right now. And you're trying to help them believe not only can they actually have these kinds of major shifts in their life, but they can actually have it. Not just anybody, not just somebody could have it. They themselves could have it. Because when you're in that really, you know what it's like when you're in that really bad space, it's really hard to believe anything. It's hard to believe that anything good can come out of this. It feels like you're just trapped.
Yes. And, I think one of the best things for anybody is to have some level of support, whether that's a friend, whether that's family, whether that is, somebody online, whether that's a coach, somebody that they can feel that inspiration from. Because, what we are listening to, what we are subjecting ourselves to is really, really important. So like the listeners, if they're listening to a show like this, they're already doing something right.
That's
right.
Because
there is a vibration in these words. There is intention here in this space. And the more, and I say this to you listeners, like listen to these episodes. Listen to these episodes when you are having a really hard day. Listen to these episodes when you are like, forget it. This is just too much, because just these words and the presence and the energy of the hosts and the guests can hold that vibration and that can help you. Because in those times when you're really down and low, you really need help vibrationally, or, do something that lights you up is also what I tell people, like listen to comedy, do something, get outside, get outdoors, put your bare feet on the earth. Please do not underestimate the power of Gaia. Our planet is incredible. She is the mother of your physical bodies. If you put your bare feet on the earth for 30 minutes, you're going to feel a shift. You're just going to feel like, oh, maybe this isn't so bad, right? So it's always those tools in the toolbox to get yourself out of that lowest rut, right? Okay, this isn't so bad. Now I can start to have a breath. It's like you pull your head above the water. So you could actually first just take a breath, and then you can start to decide, how am I going to swim back to shore?
Great tip. I love that one, especially when you're emphasizing putting your feet into, or at least on, the earth, and just redeveloping that connection. Because I know, anytime I have a guest on, in your case, it's the story of how you had this amazing Kundalini awakening while you're driving a car. And, somebody else is listening saying, well, that sounds really cool, but that's never happened to me. I can't do that. They're the person I'm trying to figure out, how do I talk to them? How do I or can I get you to talk to them? That's what I'm trying to really do here. I want Alara to talk to them right now. What do you say to them, Alara?
Yeah. And, I was sexually abused. I had a lot of trauma with regards to other people and relationships in my life. And, before it happened, it's not like I would have thought that was possible for me either. But I started to make a choice. I started my spiritual journey. I started to make a choice that even before the Kundalini awakening, I had a sense that my life could be different. And that choice, your intention, the intention to change your life is, that first step. And then get tools for your toolbox. Have things available, things that you can just have right away, whatever that is. And then things that you can step into, like meditations or sound. Sound is a beautiful way to help us. Songs that you have available to you that uplift you. Have a toolbox. And these things help you in those challenging times. And you just maintain that strong intention. Everybody has the potential for massive awakening. Everybody has a potential for magic. Everybody has a potential for miracle. Miracle isn't as obscure as we think it is. It's these tiny little steps and this intention and devotion to the process that enables these massive and transformative spaces.
Yes. As you said that, the phrase that came through my mind was, miracle is what happens while we're taking steps.
I like that.
You basically just said that. I just kind of reframed it a little bit.
Well, thank you, Will.
Seriously, that's what happened there. And that's cool. I'm liking that. I like that a lot. Well, talk about some of your favorite tools. You emphasize the toolbox, and I love that emphasis as well. But talk about some of your favorite tools.
Yeah, definitely Gaia has been, I grew up on 18 acres of land. I spent a lot of time by myself and her. I was a scuba diving instructor for years. Gaia has been at the forefront of my experience. I always create a life where I'm living in her, near her, with her. And so, you don't have to be able to go out into nature and be surrounded by forest or out into the ocean. But again, having the capacity to put your feet on bare earth is possible for everyone, right? But she will reprogram your nervous system. She will release, I want to say this to listeners, in the times I've had my hardest moments, I just go out to her and I just say, here, mother, please just take this. And she just literally sucks the energy right out of me. And I always leave like, all right, I'm good. I got this, so Gaia, I can't express that enough. Mother Nature, that space. The other one is sound. Like I said, there are very healing frequencies. Solfeggio are healing frequencies that you can find on YouTube very, very easily. They're things that you can have in the background and just sound, in your background all the time. Or you can listen to them actively, or again, music that really lights you up, or any kind of sound is vibration. And as we know from the law of attraction, everything is vibration. So sound is one of those beautiful things that also assists us, not only just with our spirit, how we're feeling emotionally, actually helps shift us vibrationally. So that's a really big one. The other one is your breath. And this is something, hey, guess what? You can access in any moment, at any point of the day. Your breath is always there. You're always breathing until you're dead, right? So it's always available to you. And sometimes just taking your awareness to your breath and just taking a deep breath. I like to do like 3 deep cleansing breaths. So that's like in the nose, out through the mouth. And I do that 3 times, or just even breathing and just having your awareness on your breath and that consistent movement. The idea that it showed up again. Oh, there it is again. Keeps showing up. It's just there. It's there. It's there. It connects us to beingness, existence, isness. So it's very, very powerful centering and anchoring process. You can do that again, anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, I love the breath part, especially since so often, we allow the breath part to just kind of be something we do autonomously, like we do in the background unconsciously. And when we do, we very often get into bad breathing practices. So it's kind of a way of reorienting. Okay, here's how we actually do full breathing, and kind of reteaching our bodies, do this more often, because you'll get a better result if you do this more often. So that's just another aspect of that. Now, you also have a video series called the Self-Trust series. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a free 3-part video series that really helps people to connect more to themselves. Like we're talking here today about, receiving messages, boundaries, being in tune with ourselves. And so the video series really helps people understand, how do we create this self-trust so that we can have this guidance. We can feel guided. We can feel in flow. We can know our boundaries and know what action to take that serves our life, rather than creating more of that struggle.
Yeah, really good. Talk also for a minute. Why is self-trust so important?
Because you are the center of the universe, my love. You are the center of your universe. You cannot be the center of somebody else's universe, and somebody else cannot truly be the center of your universe. So who do you have? You have you.
God, we could do a whole show on that one.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I can talk on and on about that one.
There are so many examples in life of people who are trying to be the center of somebody else's universe, or trying to make somebody else the center of their own universe. And oh boy, does that create all kinds of issues. It's just amazing. But this has been really, really cool. I like this a lot. If somebody wants to reach out and work with you directly, regardless of whether or not they're a CEO running a company, but just a woman who wants to work with you, how do they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can find me at alarasage.com. And then I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Alara Sage.
Okay. Really simple. And then, normally I would ask a co-host this, but we don't have a co-host here today. So I'm going to have to ask you directly. If you were to look back on what we've talked about so far, we've kind of gone off in a number of different directions, down a few rabbit holes. What would you point to as the main takeaway? The one thing that, if you forget everything else, this is the one thing that I want you to be thinking about as you kind of ponder, what you listen to in this episode while you go on to the next stage of whatever you're doing in your life today?
Yeah, what comes up right away is your story about writing your book, and this feeling of this flow and this bliss. And we've spoken about that a lot today, and I just want listeners to really understand that they can change their life, just like that 9-year-old. Even if they're not 9 years old, they can, absolutely.
So you don't have to be 9 years old to change. That's encouraging.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
Really good. Well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed having this conversation. I didn't know where this was going, to be honest. I wasn't sure what to expect of this, but this has been good. This has been good because what you've really been teaching us is that life isn't just something to live. It isn't just something to move from one moment to the next. We can just absolutely thrill in it.
Yes.
You're bringing the thrill back.
On.
Yeah.
Turned on, baby. Turned on.
Continues. Yeah. Every opportunity is the next one coming up. That's the next opportunity. And it's good to be reminded of that. And not only to be reminded of it, but to be mindful that it is possible.
Especially because once we're aware that it's possible, we start to attract it.
That's right. Yeah. Especially if we're in a place where we don't feel like stuff's possible. We need the reminder. We need the reminder. Well, you can stay in that space if you really want to, but the fact that you're listening to this suggests you probably don't want to. Why not just take a step? Even if it's just a step outside, to step on the earth, but take a step. And that's the other thing too. It almost doesn't even matter what direction you take the step in, does it?
No, and sometimes, we think they have to be these great big steps, and those little steps are just as impactful and powerful. The universe doesn't measure.
No. And it redirects too. I like the way Mike Dooley, one of the presenters in The Secret, explains it. He says it's kind of like a GPS. If you take an initial small step and it's really not in the direction that serves you best, the universe comes along in some way and says, make a legal U-turn.
I love that.
Isn't that good?
That's really I do those all the time. That's good to know.
Yeah. So if you've been making legal U-turns without really telling anybody about it, you can feel proud about that. You're like, okay, good. You're listening to your internal GPS. This is what you're supposed to be doing. That's a good thing. Something else I want to tell you too, and I do make it a point to do this with all my guests because you, like all of them, you're a giver and you have gone out of your way to just do whatever you can to keep giving and giving and giving because you discovered this wonderful thing and you wanted to share it with so many people. And so you do podcasts like this one, you have your course, your video series, you have, articles you've written and all that kind of stuff. And as a result, there are many people that you've reached, that you've touched, that you never see them, you never hear them, you don't really know what happens, you don't hear the story, but you did touch somebody's life, a lot of somebody's lives, and in ways that you'll never know about. I think it's important to recognize that. So on behalf of those people that you've never met, that you've never seen, that you never will meet, that you never will see, who you've been helping along the way, thank you for what you've been doing and what you're continuing to do because it's really important work.
Wow. Thank you so much, Walt. That was beautiful.
I really do believe it's important. We skip this part. There are a lot of ways we learn how to be grateful and appreciative in life, particularly if we do this kind of work. But we kind of forget this one piece. And I want to bring it into everybody's awareness. Everybody who is a giver does this. I mean, so I can give it to somebody like you coming onto my show. It becomes a very obvious way to do this. That's why I do that here. But I'd like to see more and more people appreciating the ways that people they know of in their lives, how they're giving and impacting lives that they don't even know about.
Yeah, I love that they don't even know about part.
They don't know about it.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that vibration and energy flows. It doesn't stop flowing. Just because it's stopped within my visual range doesn't mean it's stopped there. It actually kept going beyond that.
Yes, the emanation. Yes.
The emanation. Yeah, good stuff. So thank you very much, Alara, and thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.